Hi, I'm Jean Newman Glock, Viking's Ambassador-at-Large, and I wanted to share with you today a few of the highlights of a Rhine getaway river cruise that I just returned from. And there's been a lot of discussion about European river cruises this summer, so I wanted to hop on one, and Rhine is the most iconic. So I wanted to share some of my top experiences, some of the things I learned, but most important, I want to introduce you to some friends I made at the end and let them share their experiences on board. I also need to say, excuse me, I have a cold. It's from the grandchildren. It's not COVID. And of course, I got it at home, not traveling. So I hope my voice isn't too irritating today. Let's get going. I joined the Rhine Getaway, Viking's iconic trip, September 20th, 22. And before I get into my experience, I want to let you know that my good friend Alistair Miller has done a fantastic 5-part series on the Rhine, and you can find it here on Viking.TV, and I highly, highly recommend you watch it for a deep dive into the many wonderful things on this itinerary. But knowing that he has done such an exquisite job, I wouldn't dare try to take away from that. So I want to share a few of the different excursions that I did and the different things I may have found on board in the summer of 2022. So let's start with the elephant in the room, water levels. Everyone is talking about water levels this year. This summer, this fall, water levels has been low all over Europe. They've been low in the US. But what has the impact been? And this photo is in Cologne, and this measures the water levels. And our guide told us it's at 140, and I'm assuming that's meters, excuse my ignorance. And he said 180 is normal. So it was just a little low when I was there. But most important, what I want to share with you is Viking did not have to cancel one river cruise this summer or this fall. And there are many reasons for that. One is Viking strategically places their river ships at either end of an itinerary. So if there's a low water level in the middle, you sail up to the low point and you sail up to this point, and they would facilitate a very easy ship swap that you would hop on the other ship for the remainder of your trip in the exact same stateroom. But what was interesting is when we got on our ship the first night at the welcome dinner or welcome briefing, Morgan, our fantastic tour director, said, "Let me tell you what I think will happen." He said, "They're low, but I think we're going to be fine. But here's what might happen if they get lower." And he said, number one, we might have to slow down the itinerary. And if we do, we'll adjust all the timings of your excursions. No problem. You might have a dinner somewhere instead of a lunch. You might have an afternoon excursion instead of a morning, but your explorations aren't going to be impacted. If it gets very low, we will have to do what I described a minute ago as a ship swap. And you go out an excursion in the morning, you come back to another ship, and there you are, your explorations continue. So all of us on board breathed a sigh of relief, realizing we were going to see what we wanted to see on this wonderful itinerary. And we were gonna, excuse the pun, go with the flow. So don't believe everything you read and hear. The water levels were low. My explorations and Viking's trips were impacted to a minimal degree, even in this very low season. So that's out of the way. I chose to do the 2-day pre-extension in Basel, Switzerland, for many reasons. Flights, as you know, this summer were unpredictable, and you always want to get there a little early to be sure. And I love Switzerland. I had been there in college and looked forward to being back in Basel, particularly it's the intersection of France. Oh, I went too soon. Wait a second. France, Germany. It's just such an iconic, pristine little city. And I just made a quick video that I had shared online, and I want to share this with you. And I hope the sound is coming later. But what's also interesting is when we arrived there, the hotel director that handles guests, who was fabulous, took us on an orientation walk immediately and gave us a Basel travel card that we could use all the public transit to get around the city very easily. He also led a historic walk the next day. And the other thing that I know a lot of guests did and told me was fantastic was a full day mountain view of Lucerne excursion. And I got to go back and do it because they said it truly was fantastic. But so much to do besides just get a little extra sleep and get ready for your river cruise. So I highly, highly recommend a pre-extension. And there's several great choices. I enjoyed Basel just because I love a taste of Switzerland. So the next day is the day I adore, the day we embark. And I embarked on the Viking Sigyn. And it was so relaxing. The ship was maybe 15-minute drive from the hotel right there near Basel. And we got settled in, getting ready for our 8-day, 4-country cruise. We met the staff and crew, and we were ready to sail. Of course, I'm always ready to sail. Our first stop was in the charming town of Brisach, but the most important thing is this is the gateway to the Black Forest, or the Schwarzwald, which is the region of Europe that I think every fairy tale we ever read came from. I think Little Red Riding Hood lives there and every other one. It's iconic little fairy tale villages. The drive was enchanting. We climbed up the forest past these beautiful little villages, but our destination was the Hofgut Stern Hotel, where they preserve and showcase the traditions of the Black Forest. And I think you know those traditions, and they're beautiful. They are cuckoo clocks, glass blowing, and of course, Black Forest cake, which we saw a demonstration. We got the recipe, we ate some, but interestingly, we found out that the bus drivers couldn't eat it because the schnapps is so heavy in this cake that they wouldn't be allowed to drive the buses home. So it was delicious. So here's just a little glimpse at the drive up and when we got to the Stern Hotel, and the background music you hear is actually just the cuckoo clocks from that hotel. Here's the forest. Here's the cows. Many people hiked through the forest. Here's the wonderful Black Forest cake we all enjoyed. And wonderful cook. And here's the cuckoo clock. And if I was going to buy one, which I didn't, it would be playing The Happy Wanderer, which I think speaks to all of us that love to travel. My favorite song. We got back from the Black Forest in time to have the afternoon to walk around Brisach, and it was exquisite. Little medieval town you could climb through, have a coffee in the cafes. It was pristine, and no other tourists were there. So you had it to yourself, except for the villagers who were most welcoming. So I truly enjoyed a really great afternoon in Brisach after walking off the Black Forest cake. The next fabulous stop, and this was my 4th visit to Strasbourg, and I need to return many more times. My passion for history was fed there, number one, by how many times it's been French, German, French, German, French, German, and the melding of those cultures in the food was my primary interest this time. But before, on our walking tour that was an 8-hour food tour when we visited 10 small proprietary shops tasting every exquisite treasure of Strasbourg. But right before we did, the first stop was at this palace, and I was wondering as we walked around whose palace it was. And here we look, and I looked around and I saw this gate, and I'm a history nerd, I'm sorry, but look, it's Kaiser Wilhelm I, branding exquisite. He's known as the mustache, but he had his image on these gates surrounding his entire palace, which I thought was just kind of wonderful. So we started our group of 8, this wonderful food tour, trying to think. We went to bakeries. Oh, I'm sorry. I said I could handle the slides and I'm not doing too well. Bakeries, pastries, gingerbread, sausages, cheese, Flammkuchen, which is the dish of this Alsatian region. And we not only tasted the savory and the sweet Flammkuchen, but we watched 2 members of our group help make it. And it was an awful lot of fun. Then we had chocolates, macaroons, beer, and wine. It was a perfect day, except we really ate ourselves pretty full. But here's a little glance
Only
at
with
this
single
wonderful
origin
chocolatier
chocolates. So if you're not
who
familiar
shared chocolates from
with what
every
this is,
region of the
chocolate
world.
is a fruit
And
that
we
is close to
tasted
wine or to
many
coffee.
regions of the world. And they
This
also
chocolate is
had the
cocoa
gorgeous
and cocoa
macaroons,
grows in
again,
different
sweet
countries.
and savory. The food scene in Strasbourg is second to none, and I would highly recommend this tour. Of course, my passion is always cheese. And this cheese shop was fantastic. We learned about the cows that make the cheese, the local farmers. Everything in here was totally local and had a history in the region. So it was a lot of fun learning the history through the cheeses, and both French, German, anything you can imagine. The bakery, my favorite always. And those big things in the front were meringues, and everything was delicious. And then, of course, the pastry shops. It was a magnificent time. Although at the end, what we learned, and here is the famous Strasbourg Cathedral, and I'm showing you this so you can look at the tower. Beautiful medieval cathedral that my friends are going to chat about at the end here a little more. But why that's interesting is here I am, and I'm getting ready to do something that every builder of this cathedral was required to do every morning. And it was such difficult work in such small quarters, and there was such fantastic food in Strasbourg, that every worker had to see if he could fit between this post and the building. And if he couldn't fit, he couldn't go up for the day. But amazingly, probably because I was halfway through the day, I fit. But I had never heard of this for builders, but it was the builder test if you could fit and go up and continue your work. More about the cathedral from my friends. And this is a photo I know you've seen of Strasbourg many times, the half-timbered houses, the beauty of a perfectly preserved city. But I just had to share it again because I love Strasbourg and everything about the melding of cultures that really speak of a united Europe before there was a united Europe. It's a city that has it all. Next, we visited Speer, and just a few minutes walk from this central plaza of Speer, our ship docked. It literally 3 minutes walk, and it's an exquisite medieval town, very small, and known for its medieval cathedral. And we got a beautiful history of the cathedral. But what I really wanted to see was the crypt, which I had read about in medieval histories, and it's the largest and most perfect Romanesque crypt in the world. When I climbed down to see, what I wanted to see were the medieval tombs of kings and emperors of the Middle Ages, including some of the first Holy Roman emperors. Here's a look at the central plaza where we all enjoyed learning about the cathedral that you'll see here at the end. And again, look how empty the city is. I love touring where there are not crowds of tourists. And this was just our little group from the ship in this exquisite, exquisite Romanesque cathedral. And then I did one picture down in the crypt. They didn't allow videos, but these are the tombs, and this is described as the most perfect crypt in Europe. And it was very serene, very beautiful, and just a very different stop. And that's what I love about Viking. It finds the stops that are so unique that add to your fuller picture of the region that you're exploring. You think you go for one thing, probably to see the castles in the Middle Rhine, but then you become mesmerized by something else that Viking has uncovered for you. Then began my wine tasting. Well, we had some wine in Strasbourg, but in Rudesheim, we were offered the optional excursion for a wine tasting at Eberbach Monastery. And I decided to. I love visiting monasteries. I love hearing what the monks were known for in each specific one. And this one is no longer active, but this region had been making wines, of course, since Roman times, but the monks had been making it throughout the Middle Ages when it was active. And it was the most evocative spot for a wine tasting. Again, Viking found the spot that I thought was perfect. And you can't see it well, but I did want to give you a glimpse of where we went in for our wine tasting. And it was Rieslings, which I will say a little more in a minute, but not the Rieslings you've tried here in the States, not at all. And in the monastery, there were 25 of these beautiful wine presses preserved from the 17th century, most of them dated. And it was an entire Gothic hall full of wine presses that you can imagine the monks producing it back in the day. It was such an evocative wine tasting. I highly, highly recommend it. The next day is the day that most of us imagine when we think of taking a Rhine River cruise, and it's the castles of the Middle Rhine. And right the night before we sailed, and if you turn on the camera, James, I want to show what was put in our stateroom. Well, maybe not. This was put in our stateroom, Castles of the Middle Rhine, a map that has 20 of the castles named and their history, and believe me, you need it. I sat up on the sun deck all day with my map, but most wonderfully, our tour director gave commentary. Here's right before we started down the Middle Rhine with the German flag and Vikings. And as we sailed the Rhine, our tour director gave the most fantastic commentary all day. I don't know how he did it. It was probably 6 hours of beautiful commentary, but it was what I imagined would be a highlight. It was a highlight, along with many, many other things I enjoyed on this itinerary. Here's a sample of just, I think, 3 of the castles. And these photos aren't zoomed. We were that close to the castles. You saw the flags, you saw the cars passing by. It was a beautiful, beautiful day. Next, I put this picture in because it speaks to me. I love breakfast on the Viking River ships. And this, I'm usually the first one in, and this has just looked so perfect. It looked artistic to me, but it is my favorite time of day as we're getting ready for our first excursion. And this was as we were sailing into Cologne. And I just walked in and thought, this is what I'm going to miss so much. Beautifully, beautifully done. And of course, always so delicious. And when I looked out the window, this is what I saw sailing into Cologne. We go to Cologne for the history, but the contemporary is very much a part of the city. And anyone who has seen anything I do on Viking TV knows I love a Roman road. And there's just something, if I can walk along alone on a Roman road, I am transported to Roman times. This one was right beside the Cologne Cathedral, which is the highlight of the city. But here I am walking along the Roman road, and it's transporting, and it's still an alleyway there that everyone can walk on in the city. I love it. I love that they haven't removed it or covered over it. Now, I told you I did some excursions that Alistair didn't have time to on his because there's so many wonderful choices at every stop. This one, I had no idea. The Brühl UNESCO Palaces. You can explore on your own in Cologne, but I opted to take a short ride outside the city to see these palaces. This is the Archbishop's Castle, Augustburg Castle, and then we saw, secondly, his hunting lodge. But both take you back to life in the 18th century for these princes of the region, the archbishops that really were the royalty of the region. But to walk and tour the castles that were filled with the decorative arts of the period, you understood exactly how these archbishops lived. And it was pretty fantastic. But they're small. It's not like being at Versailles, more like being at Vaux-le-Vicomte if you've toured that outside Paris. Exquisite. And here's the exterior, which beautiful proportions, very tasteful, a little quiet, I would say. And again, there weren't many other visitors there when we were there, which made it all the more special. So despite that exterior, you go inside, and this is what's inside. The decor is full-blown Rococo, or I would call it Rococo, more than I've ever seen before. And this period of design is often described as exuberant, and I think you'll agree that this captures the exuberance of this palace. And this was just the entry hall. Every other room, every floor was decorated within an inch of its life. It was fantastic to see, almost exhausting to walk through. So wonderfully, after you have gone through this palace and the unbelievable design, you go out in the gardens that I had heard were modeled after Versailles, and of course, much smaller, but very beautiful. And it was a beautiful afternoon with local guests enjoying the fall afternoon. There was a wedding. It was idyllic just to sit and watch life go by in the garden for the people that live right next to the Brule castles. And here's a look at those gardens. And this is not color adjusted. The skies were this blue, the building is that yellow. This was a beautiful, beautiful fall day. And though small, the gardens are perfectly proportioned and really, really exquisite. I would highly recommend this excursion. It's an optional excursion, but really wonderful for the afternoon to get out and see something so different and that even as a history nerd, I had never heard of. So then we get to Amsterdam and we're back to cheese, my passion. I've said before, I like cheese more than wine, but it's a close toss up. So we went to the family-run Gouda cheese factory, and we met the owner's son who took us through the history of this and how they make the cheese and the different gradations from the very mature to the very young. And of course, we tasted them all. They were fabulous, and we bought a lot. And my suitcase, my carry-on was filled with mature Gouda cheese, which tasted amazingly like Parmesan, very crumbly. I've enjoyed it here at home. And I had to pose. My cheese passion is well known. My final slide before I introduce you to my new friends is about all the visits we had for wine tastings of Rieslings. And as I mentioned before, the Rieslings that I had always had here in the States are very sweet dessert wines, which I don't mind, but most people turn their nose up it a little. The Rieslings have now become a lot more popular in the States because a few more types are being imported. But what we found out is the very finest never leave this Alsatian region. The finest Rieslings are dry, exquisite, on land that has, I said, at Eberbach, has always been used for vineyards since Roman times. And I enjoyed getting to know more of the history of Riesling, but also of the different qualities and appreciating it as a very, very fine wine. Every trip I take, the highlight is the people I meet, the guides who share their passions, the staff, the crew on board, of course, but also the friends I meet on board. And often I'm traveling alone, so kind groups of people or kind friends adopt me. And this most wonderful group of friends traveling together, I will let them explain, but they were a dinner group that met ever so often in their hometown. And they adopted me at one of the Riesling tastings, and we became great friends and had a wonderful dinner together that got far too rowdy in the dining room, but it was an awful lot of fun, which is why I decided they might be perfect to join us today. They had a passion for travel that I share with them. So here's a look at the different Rieslings that we tasted, the different tastings, and it ends with a video of when I met three of my new friends. Here's at Eberbach. I just had to show it again because it is so gorgeous, and with the oak wine cast in the background from the 1600s. And she's explaining it if I'm not speaking too loudly over them. And this was the last Riesling winery, and here's three of my wonderful friends, and I've asked them to join me today to share highlights of their trip. I know my highlight was meeting them, and they were part of a larger group that we'll see at the end, but I'd like to welcome Greg Gimbaugh, Todd Jones, and Rick Eisen, and thank you for coming on to share your experience on Rhine Getaway.
Thanks, Jean.
Thank you, Jean.
Before we get going, Greg, I see you're in uniform, and I understand that you might be called away. Would you like to explain what you do?
Yes, I'm a fire chief here in the Lansing, Michigan area. So in the event something big happens, I may have to leave. So if you hear a loud tone and I leave, that's exactly what's happening.
We will fully understand. Thank you. I know you all did a lot of things different than I did. There's so many options on this getaway, except for the wine tasting that we shared, and I already shared a little video of that. And you've shared some of your photos with me and also some of your thoughts about cruising on Viking. But before we share your photos, could I ask each of you, was this your first cruise or not? Greg?
No, I'd been on a Caribbean cruise before. This was my first longboat cruise with Viking, and I'm already planning to do the Danube and the Christmas market tour next year. So I'm working on getting that planned out.
Oh, that'll be wonderful. You might see me on board. Todd, was this your first Viking cruise?
This was Rick and my first Viking cruise. We've been on another cruise line, a larger ship, but this is our first time on a longboat. And we are, like Greg, hoping to plan another one soon.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, if we could look at your first picture that you sent and tell me why you chose this one.
I don't remember if that's one I took coming down from the cable car.
Ah.
From the castles up there that we got lost in.
Yes.
That was an amazing part of the cruise that we went on, just going up that large cable car, the view of the city, the ruins, the castle. But you're right, we did get lost in the castle. So.
This was in Koblenz, I believe.
Yes.
Even Google Earth couldn't get us out.
You tried Google Earth?
Yes, we did.
It was beautiful. The ship docked right under the cable cars going overhead, and I thought that was beautiful.
And it was a great shot of our home for the week.
I think we have a next one that is also enjoying your home for the week.
Oh yes, yes. We really lucked out with the weather. We had really good weather, so we had a lot of time to spend outside up on the top deck and just enjoy all the wonderful service. I just can't speak highly enough of the service and how well taken care of we were.
Oh, and I neglected to mention that in my presentation. It was just superb, and I miss all of the staff so much.
They learned all of our names, our habits, our favorites. The first day they knew who we were, and our practical joking side, they helped us with those things too.
I think you'll find that's not unique on this one cruise. On every Viking ship, they know my name before I can learn theirs, and I'm just always amazed.
And yep. I don't think I shared this memory, but I had purchased a book to read. Unfortunately, I didn't read it much during the trip because there was too much else to do. But I had the book lying on the bed, and it had a homemade bookmark in it. When I came back and our cabin steward had been in, the homemade bookmark was still there, but it had also been supplemented by a Viking bookmark.
Oh,
really?
Very thoughtful.
That's attention to detail.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think the next picture is similar to y'all enjoying the ship.
That's still on the upper deck. Like Todd said, the weather was perfect. I believe that's just before we set sail, isn't it?
On the first day in Basel.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a long day there between incoming flight and departure, but it was a pleasant day.
Oh, that's good to hear. Rare this summer.
And we were met at the airport, escorted where we needed to be, got on a bus, and boom, we're there without any hassles, any problems. It was great.
I think that's what people don't realize often is that the minute you land at your destination, the Viking takes you underarm, and then you are escorted directly to your hotel or ship. So you really have no worries.
And that was the same returning. They escorted us to the airport and showed us where to check in. So it was pretty hassle-free.
Oh, that's good to hear, and exactly my experience as well. And this was even at Amsterdam Airport, where again we've heard a lot about this summer, but I had no trouble checking in and getting through security. I hope y'all didn't as well.
No, we kind of, they led us to a line and escorted us right to our airline. Do you have your e-ticket or do you need one? We had ours, and we just went right through the queue and were first in line, and everything else was that quick.
Again, I had at the introduction, which I don't believe y'all were on, I had spoken about all the press about water levels and explained how it didn't impact ours and that Viking hadn't had to cancel any trips. And now about Amsterdam Airport, I'm sure there have been some problems, but the majority of people I spoke with didn't have any, and that's good to hear. Next slide. Who shared this one?
That was one of the guest artisans that came on board.
Oh, yeah.
Doing glass blowing. So it was really nice. They brought on some different people from the different locations that we were at, and this was glass blowing, and it was fascinating. Like right on the ship, they had this 1,000-degree flame going, and it was really cool.
It's amazing. It sounded like a fire hazard to me, but it certainly were beautiful, beautiful objects.
Exactly, and very up close for all of us. In particular, the glass blower was involving people from the audience in a very interactive way. We happened to just be there as opposed to, planning on it, and it was just worth staying for.
I think when Viking, at the height of COVID, they weren't able to bring people on board, but now that's over, and it is a highlight of every trip to bring the local culture on board so you can get to know them in a much smaller atmosphere than visiting in the town. So I'm glad that part is over and they're now back on board. Next photo. So what did you think of the German theme night on board?
I love that.
Yes. Yes, and there was so much fun involved with it. Everything on the menu was featured. I mean, all German items.
Yeah, it was surprising. We walked into the dining area and they had transformed it with decorations, and the staff were in some sort of like local dress, and it was wonderful.
And Rick's shirt happened to match their attire for the night. So
yeah.
Yes.
Oh, but you didn't wear your lederhosen. You didn't buy any leather shorts to wear. I'm disappointed in you all.
Yeah, no one needs to see that.
We just have a hat.
Our famous last words, they'll only look at us once and then they'll never look again.
I think it would have added to the theme, but it was a great night. Unfortunately, that night was the day after I had done an 8-hour food tour and eaten for 8 hours. So while I enjoyed the atmosphere, I'm afraid I didn't have much room left for the delicious foods.
And there was a lot to choose from, like Rick said.
I saw it, and I got to go back, and when I'm not doing the food tour.
Yeah,
we
did our. Well, I was just going to say we did our best.
You made
trying to eat a little of everything.
Oh, good. I have no doubt you gentlemen did. The next slide.
I took that. That was where we went to the cuckoo clock factory, and that was the rail bridge that we walked to go into the Black Forest.
So you did the hike into the Black Forest.
Yes.
How was that? Because I didn't do it.
It was beautiful back there. The waters that ran through there, they were talking about lower water levels, but still hearing the waterfalls and coming down through the rocks and everything, and being able to walk in there, it just was peaceful. You just heard wilderness and nothing else.
This picture is gorgeous. And
what I liked about that stop, and a lot of the stops, were that they had different activity levels available. So like the hike was a little bit more strenuous if you went the whole hike, but there was also like the Black Forest cake making. So there's other options for people with different ability levels.
And one thing about that bridge, there's history that they tell you about where that bridge was there in World War II, and at one point the upper level was destroyed, but they rebuilt it, and now you'll see the electric trains going across there every so often. So it's just neat to see part of history.
Oh, I'm sorry I missed that. It's for the next trip, the next time.
And Jean, just remember, they have a wonderful Black Forest cake demonstration. It's worth getting a piece in the cafeteria or the little restaurant there and trying it out. We didn't realize so much whipped cream went into it.
Making it
going to
or how much schnapps?
Quite a bit.
But Rick is going to make the cake part, and we're going to have another, like a dinner club get together, and it's going to be our own German night again.
I mentioned, I think, in the introduction, y'all, would you want to explain to our viewers, you're a dinner group, and that's what put all of y'all together on this tour?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think that's lovely. And you meet how often? And are you going to have a German night?
Well, we're a group that's loosely met together over like the last 20 years, and it constantly is evolving as time goes on. Sometimes it's themed, sometimes it's just potluck. And yes, by all means, we are doing a German night with Black Forest cake, schnapps, and some of that wonderful peach liqueur.
Oh, did you buy that?
Yes, and so somehow that will be worked into the evening in addition to the Black Forest cake.
Send me pictures.
Will do.
All right, next picture.
So this is the facade of Notre Dame in Strasbourg. Like Greg was saying, the history that you experience, and having taken advantage of all the guided tours is highly recommended. It's fun to be out on your own, and usually you have time to do it, but having somebody that's knowledgeable from the location to walk you through with your little earpiece, so you're not disturbing other people as you're being guided. That was fascinating. The history is what I really like about it.
Now, is this
in that picture? I think that gate.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think that, if I remember right, that gate in front of the facade there, wasn't that the Cardinals' entrance that only the Cardinal could go through? That's why it had that fence across it.
Yep.
Ah, good memory. Remind me, I know you climbed to the top of one steeple. Was it in Strasbourg or Cologne?
It was the Strasbourg.
Yep, it's one of the views as you're walking up. And again, the different activity levels, this was a little bit more strenuous, but everyone that was walking up and down had no problems. You just take your time, and it was well worth it.
You're being generous, Todd. It was strenuous, and we got passed by people older than ourselves who were carrying backpacks. But they were very kind and generous in not saying anything.
But you made it, and I was eating my way around the city, so I can't make any commentary.
But to anybody who might be considering, it is worth the climb to the top for impressive views of Strasbourg.
Just one of my favorite cities of all time. Do we have one more slide?
It's where we stopped at the brew house in Cologne and had dinner as a group.
So you did
Wayne.
the brew house evening pub crawl.
We didn't do the pub crawl. This was a restaurant that was pointed out by our guide that was recommended. So when the tour ended, we wandered around the city, and we ended up there eating and had a great time.
It looks like it.
Yeah, and the evening before we hit Cologne, and I'm sorry that I'm missing his name, but our cruise director,
Morgan.
Yes, Morgan went through very detailed that if we were to go to one of these places, what we had to do.
Hear that? It's a great story.
Yeah, and they purposefully give you small glasses of beer, which are put on a coaster, and the waiter marks every time that he puts a glass down. And according to Morgan, after you've had your fourth, he puts a fifth mark, which is a tip for the waiter. But when you're done drinking, you simply take the coaster, flip it over your glass, and you're done drinking. But this brew house was true to form and offered both great food and just kind of fun with the waiter.
Yeah, and like Rick was saying, there's instructions, and I remember one of them from Morgan was, if you don't put the coaster on, they'll keep filling it. So you have to know, time to put the coaster on.
It's fast. As soon as you put an empty glass down, a full one's put down, and when Rick mentioned the tip is they get a glass of beer.
Yeah.
And we saw that happen when the table left behind us. Wayne, well, our waiter said to call him Wayne, and another server there. They both had a beer, raised it in the air, and downed it, and on they went to taking care of other tables.
Sorry, I missed that one.
Yeah.
It just sounds like such a perfect experience. And just so our viewers know, the longboat was docked so close that what was it, a 5-minute walk at the most to this brew house?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. And like this next picture is I had the pork knuckle.
Yeah.
That's a tiny little meal.
Tiny
Yes.
little, very, very little.
Yeah.
And you weren't having any fun.
No.
No.
Oh. And the wait staff it was fun joking with the wait staff. They were really entertaining.
Well, even the table next to us, they were laughing at us because we were just having fun.
Well,
Yeah,
I think that is your group. Y'all genuinely had the most fun of anyone I've been around in a while. I loved it.
Yep. So there you can see Dory and Bev, who also traveled with us. And you can see the little glasses of beer.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I please tell Dory and Bev hello from me, and I appreciate being adopted by your group. But sometimes people ask what it's like traveling alone on a Viking River or ocean or expedition cruise, and I'm usually alone, and I find I make more friends when I'm alone. I love it with my husband, but if I'm alone, I make more friends, and then wonderful lifelong friends like all of y'all, I hope.
Oh yeah, and that one morning, you and I were the only ones downstairs having breakfast. And it's like, where is everybody? We just got up early, just had a nice conversation, looked at things outside, and it's something that people have got to experience. It was such fun.
Well, Viking had a slogan, and I think it's so true. And it was that breakfast, because Greg, I have such fond memories of our time there, and it's small moments, big memories. And it is interesting that breakfast sticks with me as just such an enjoyable time getting to know you, and every moment, but it's ones like that you don't expect, sitting there having breakfast alone in a big dining room outside Cologne.
Yeah.
And
Any last thoughts, gentlemen, that you'd like to share?
Whenever we come back from vacation and you go back to work, people are like, how was it? I said, I highly recommend Viking. It's a different experience than going on the larger ships.
And I've told people here that same thing. I'm already planning to go again next year. So I just have to work out logistics and get information from our travel agent for the Christmas villages. Christmas markets, I should say.
Thanks.
And you guys took the words right out of my mouth. I just found sailing on the longboat experience much more intimate. I've never had the experience of really getting to know both staff and other people aboard the cruise. This just really is a much more intimate setting, but still allows for your privacy if you want it. It's kind of the best of both worlds.
Well said. I find, and that is distinctly not just river, but I find it on ocean as well. But I'm glad y'all found it as well. I should warn people when they see me on the next trip, if you make friends with me, I won't make you be on Viking.TV, but I really appreciate y'all doing it with me because I think it gives a broader perspective. I was a fan of Viking long before I became an employee, and I can tell people that, but to hear it from y'all, I think makes it even a little more special to understand the experience of sailing with Viking. So thank you. And stay in touch, please. And
we will.
I
will.
I hope I sail again with you. It really was wonderful. And my best to the ladies as well.
It was good to see you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Oh, you're welcome.